Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
I would like to introduce Luke Scarmazzo. Luke is a longtime activist. I have just had the pleasure of meeting him, but our mutual friend Angela Baca
Yes.
is his manager, and he has this book out, uh, The High Price. I recommend you go out and get this. The cover of it says Luke was sentenced to over 2 decades in federal prison for running a state legal medical marijuana dispensary in California in the early 2000s. His case garnered international coverage, including features in New York Times and San Francisco Chronicle, as well as the attention of the Trump White House. High Price is Luke's story, in his own words, is told from solitary confinement in a federal prison. Luke Scarmazzo is an entrepreneur and advocate for drug policy reform who served nearly 15 years in federal prison for opening a state legal cannabis dispensary. And you have your own podcast.
Yes, Joint Forces with Luke Scarmazzo.
All
Little
right.
play on words, but yeah, that sounds like a pretty interesting book. I'd read it.
Yeah, me too. So you started, I heard about your case. I've been doing this television show since 1996.
Wow.
And typically we start with a hemp news segment, and I read various news stories.
Right.
So back in the day, I guess 15 years ago, I covered your case
Wow.
here on our story and how you'd been arrested for operating a legal marijuana dispensary and the trials and tribulations you had to go through. Do you want to, in a nutshell, go back to, let's start at the beginning. How did you become a medical marijuana and marijuana activist?
Well, I have to go all the way back then. I come from like a just legacy background. My father was a grower. My aunts and uncles were all growers. They all consumed and sold cannabis. Like from my earliest memories, cannabis was in our household. My dad always had plants growing in the backyard. It was never anything nefarious, or like it was never, we were taught about it. It was spoken, openly. It was not something that was for kids and stuff like that. It was completely like, we didn't really like the whole neighborhood. Like I lived in a primarily like Mexican American, Asian American neighborhood, and like those communities and cultures heavily grow and are involved in cannabis too. So it was like normal to me growing up. I didn't really realize.
The San Diego area?
Modesto. I'm sorry. Yeah. It was born and raised in Modesto. So this is, Modesto in the 90s and 80s and 90s. So I didn't really realize that the cannabis had like the social stigma it did until I got into like, I want to say like 3rd or 4th grade, and then the DARE program and all like the Nancy Reagan Just Say No, like the barrage of the war on drugs and the indoctrination of our younger generation. That's when I really started like to see, hey, this is not like the normal, beneficial plant that I see everybody. They're saying that it makes you steal from your mom and hurt people, and all this, nonsense that they used to proliferate back in elementary school to a lot of the kids and that were going through those programs. So I don't want to say it shifted my view, but it made it to where I understood, hey, this is not what I had thought it was when I was a kid, as like, just the regular growing vegetation plant that's in the garden with all the rest of my mom's stuff that she's growing back there. And then I would say in my early teens, I started seeing the law enforcement aspect of it, where we were getting, harassed by police officers and, searched and, all kinds of, madness. And then the school system, of course, like if I would go to school smelling like weed, or if I had weed, like, it was always a problem with school. So I was always getting kicked out of school. And like, it was, I started to have like all the negative repercussions of what prohibition has created, and so it put me on kind of a stint where I was just like, okay, well, I'm gonna go head in on this. So I started growing myself at like 15 years old. I consumed I think I smoked my first joint at 12. Um, my mom's probably pissed that I'm saying that right now, um, but yeah, it was just like, it's such a natural environment growing up in like Northern California in the 80s and 90s. Cannabis culture was everywhere. So when they passed the medical laws in 96, it was a big deal, but it didn't change anything on on the street level back then. Practically, like, yeah, we passed in 96 Compassionate Use Act, and we heard some rumblings about, a few what they called cannabis clubs, in San Francisco, but they weren't like it's nothing like what what you would see today as a club, or a dispensary. It was more like a group of people that just got together and, shared cannabis and sold cannabis. And like, it wasn't like the network of dispensaries and systems that we have now. So the law didn't really take hold until like 2003. And in 2003, California passed the Medical Marijuana Program Act. And that gave a kind of loose, I would say, a loose outline of what like the dispensary could look like at the beginning. It had a lot of things that aren't around today, where it had to be a nonprofit, and it had these certain like stipulations on it, but it created a system, kind of a gray area system, I guess we could say. And because I had been involved in cannabis my whole life, really, it was just a natural progression to say, hey, let's kind of move into like this new and emerging industry that we kind of already have like a PhD in. So I meet my best friend and co-defendant at the time in high school. We played on our football team together. He was the nose guard, and I played a bunch of different positions. But we got really, really good, became really good friends there. So when we initially have the idea to open a dispensary, and we didn't have any blueprint on that too. This is in 2004. There's not dispensaries where you can look at how they're operating, or there's not a rule book to it or anything like that. Like, we were literally blazing this path and kind of making up self-regulation as we went to make it to where, hey, like, we want this to be the model of how this system can really work. So we have to come up with our own kind of restrictions and guardrails and things to make it, not only function and do what it's supposed to, but for the outside people looking in, you want this to look like a legitimate, well lit, well regulated environment, right? So we had to do all those things. And so Ricardo and I opened the dispensary. We initially were going to open it in Stockton. We walked into the meeting with the mayor and the city council there, and I got like 2 sentences out before they were like, not in my town. And that was really the mentality from, the top to the bottom of the state at that time. It was everywhere. It was a not in my town mentality. There was a few localities that were more progressive in the Bay Area. Like when we opened California Healthcare Collective in 2004, there's 2 dispensaries that I know for sure were in existence, because that's where we were kind of going to and talking with some of the owners, and that's where I initially got our first corporate attorney. So it was the 3rd floor in Oakland, and then there was a one in the city in San Francisco called Mission.
So yeah, what were those businesses and lawyer that you reached out to there in 2004?
So the business was the 3rd floor in Oakland. It was right behind Jeff Jones's OCBC. So Jeff Jones had his spot on Telegraph, and then the 3rd floor was on the next block over.
Excuse me, the Oakland
Cannabis Buyers Cooperative.
Yeah. And he set up Oaksterdam as a university as well.
Yes, him and his wife Dale Sky Jones, who's another amazing advocate. Those 2 people are exceptional, and this whole industry and movement wouldn't be where it is without Jeff Jones and Dale Sky Jones. That's 100. But yeah, so at that time, yeah, there was literally 2 dispensaries, and they're in Oakland and San Francisco, which is, more progressive and more open-minded, we'll say, than Modesto was in 2004. So when we opened the dispensary, I'll take you to the day. We opened the dispensary kind of without a lot of fanfare. I would say 25 people came in, maybe half of them bought cannabis. Well, the other like dozen just came in to see if it was real. Like you could see it on their face, like they were told that there's a place where you could buy weed legally, but they didn't believe it yet. So they just wanted to walk in and say, hey, like, they showed their recommendation. You know, we created a double verification system at the door, then at the receptionist, and they would show their paperwork, and they'd come in and look and see what we had, look at our selection, and just walk out. It's weird. But the following day, the Modesto Bee newspaper journalist came to the door and wanted to come in and take pictures and write a story. And we said, you can't come in, you have to have a recommendation. You know, if you get one, you're more than welcome to come in. We don't allow pictures. Like back then, you couldn't use your phone in a dispensary. You couldn't take pictures in a dispensary. All that was off limits. No cameras, no any of that stuff. So he asked me point blank, he says, are you guys selling cannabis, or are you selling pot here, is what he said. And I said, I paused for a minute because I wasn't prepared like to come out publicly as like the spokesman for medical marijuana in California or in the Central Valley. So I paused, but then I thought, like, there's no way I can say no here. Like, no, we're not. And like, there's people walking out behind me from the door. And he could easily just, you know, grab one of the customers that came out and they would talk to him. So I tell him yes. I said, yes, we are. We're a medical marijuana establishment. And if you have a doctor's recommendation, you can come here and obtain your medicine. And then he just leaves. He left, and I didn't think much of it until the next day. They put us on the front page, huge block letters, pot shop in Modesto. And as I'm driving to work that day, it's like, you know, 8 a.m. I really think that my parking lot's going to be full of police. Like, I think I'm driving basically to my funeral here. Like, that's the feeling that it was, because I'm like, there's no way this city's gonna, like, they're not cool with this. They were very vocal about being not having a dispensary in Modesto city limits. But you know, fortunately for us and the rest of the industry, like, it wasn't up to them. It was a state law at that time, and unless, you know, localities had passed bans and stuff, which they hadn't at that time. They did after us. We kicked off the whole ban and moratorium situation that happened early on in the state. As soon as Modesto knee-jerked and passed their ban on dispensaries, everybody else did it. Stockton, Sacramento, Fresno, like the entire state just went and blanketed these moratoriums and bans everywhere, because the city councils didn't want to get caught off guard with just these spots opening up and then them having to scramble to figure out what was going on. But unintentionally, from doing that, what they didn't understand is because we were already doing business and had records and you know, all of our corporate records were in order and all that stuff, we were grandfathered.
And you
had
an attorney to fight.
Right. And we had an attorney to battle it out with them. So what ends up happening is they create a situation we are smack in the middle of like 100-mile radius in the center of the state where there's no other dispensaries. And
so when you got to your parking lot, you were overflowed with customers.
So when
I
got to the parking lot, it was literally wrapped all the way down the block. And the parking lot was full of customers. Yes, it wasn't. I couldn't pull into the parking lot. I had to park on the street because there were so many people. And then after that, it was just exponential growth. Like, we would have, you know, it would be 1,000 patients, then it would be 1,500 patients, and we'd have servicing 2,000, 3,000. It was just like continuously, like, exponential growth week over week. Sales numbers were starting to go crazy. Supply was going crazy. Like, it turned into a situation where we would get off work at 7. Our hours were 10 a.m. to 7. We did this is so weird because this does not in existence anymore. We did a 10 a.m. to 1. Then we closed for an hour. The entire crew closed, the dispensary closed. We would all go to lunch from 1 to 2, and then we would reopen the dispensary at 2, and then we'd go till 7. At 7 o'clock, Ricardo and I would have to go find the next day's supply. Like, because we were literally like crushing the supply that we had every day. So it turned into a thing where like we would be going up to, midnight, 1 a.m, sourcing from every grower that we knew in our network or any growers they had in their network, and really like ran dry the entire Central Valley. And that became a problem. Now the problem was we didn't have the supply to meet the demand, and it started to make it to where our selection would start to dwindle down, and we wouldn't have as many strains and stuff that we wanted, or the edible selection, or the small concentrate collection section that we had. So what ends up happening is a friend of he's a good friend of mine now, but I didn't know him at the time, walks into the dispensary. His name's Addison Demora. He comes in and says, "Can I speak to the owner?" He talks to one of our managers, and they're like, "He's kind of busy right now. Like, what can I help you with?" And he says, "I need to talk to them." So I come out, I talk to him. I'm like, "Hey, how can I help you?" He's like, "Your board's looking like really kind of not very good." And I'm like, "You called me out of the office to come tell me that my board wasn't like looking up to your like specs. All right, cool, man." Like, and he was like, "No, like, I think I can help you out." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Like, make a vending appointment with Amanda at the front desk, and we'll get you in there." I said, "We don't do like just walk-ins on vendors and stuff like that. We have to make sure that it's all scheduled and organized." And he goes, "No, that's not that type of situation that I want." And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, "This is you have to come over with us and kind of come look at it." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's not really something that we do." He goes, "Well, I heard you guys were looking for like some of the purples, like the Granddaddy." And now he had my attention, because the Granddaddy at that time was so scarce, and it would pop up like every now and again, like in Oakland or something, or at a traditional market place, and then it would be gone. You wouldn't be able to get it again. And it was such a unique plant for that time. Like, now everything is purple, everything is, smells great, everything, but it wasn't like that in '04. When the purples hit the scene in like 2003, 2004, it was like special. It was really phenomenal. It was a really exotic looking flower, and it really took like that whole scene by storm, but we couldn't get it. So when Addison tells me about the possibility of having a Granddaddy Connect, and then he tells me where it's at, that we have to go drive up to the Emerald Triangle to go look at it. I mean, we were apprehensive, but we didn't have a whole lot of choice at the time. We were like, all right, like we can go up there and check it out, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But like, if it does, it'll be a great thing for us. And if it doesn't, then we're just in the same position we're in. So we didn't have a lot to lose. So we drive up there. We drive to a friend's house named he's a really good friend of mine now too. His name is Jerry Scarborough, Scarb, up there in Mendocino. And I can say their names now, which is weird, because the whole time, like as I'm writing the book, you don't know this, Paul, but as I'm writing the book, I don't use any of the names. I don't use any of the places that I did. Those were all edits after I got out of prison. And I knew, okay, and I talked to the people and said, "Hey, is it okay if I use your name here?" And they're like, "Yeah, absolutely." Like, most of the people were like excited that I was going to use their name now. But like back when I'm writing, or back when I'm doing this and writing the book, I'm writing it in solitary confinement. I don't have access to any of these people. I don't really know what it's like, what the sentiment is like out here with saying what somebody used to be a grower or used to do stuff on the traditional market. So it's funny, because I go back into High Price and I edit it out, and I put the town in Mendocino, Willits. I put Jerry's name in there. I put Addison's name in there, and it was something that I had to, just make sure that it okay with them, but also just okay, period. I didn't want to get anybody in trouble by writing a book that something could, catch the ear of some law enforcement. But we get up there, we're up in Mendocino, and we meet Jerry and his wife. We kind of hang out. We walk his property, and at the end of the trip, he lets us know that, hey, I have plenty of Granddaddy, I have plenty of Purple Urkel, I have OG Kush, I have Sour Diesel, I have all the like the top sought after strains at the time. He said, and supply will never be a problem for you guys. And from that point forward, I think we started out moving we started out getting packs from him at like 50 pounds a week. Went up to like 100 pounds a week. And then at one point we were at like 150 and 200 pounds a week coming just from Jerry. And then we had all of our other grows and all of our other vendors that were all still coming in and bringing in a bunch of different varieties. But it was the Granddaddy now, the consistent supply that we could supply everybody with, changed the game. And it made it to where the Central Valley was able to experience a particular cultivar that nobody had. And we literally like put it out there. Like we didn't hoard it like how a lot of the other growers and genetics guys did at the time. Like back then, like if you had a really, really special cultivar, you didn't really share it with a lot of people. It was something you grew and you kind of put out. Well, now, that's changed. Now it's marketability. Now it's about getting your name out there and all those things. But back then it wasn't like that. So for us to, we ended up getting cuts of it, clones of the genetics. And then, after a lot of heated discussions, decided to really just massively put it out onto the market. And just, we flooded the market with that cultivar. I don't want to say flooded because I guess that's a strong word, because we didn't have the ability to flood. We only had like a few mother plants, but we were consistently putting out hundreds and hundreds of clones every week of these cultivars in the Central Valley. And that was unheard of for like to do with this special strain.
At your dispensary, you'd sell patients clones.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. At the time, patients could buy 6, or they could have up to 12 clones, 6 in flower. So that was how we could sell them up to 12 clones at any point in time. And clones back then, they were like, $10 or something like that. And they were very attainable. And then they could come in and we would help them, grow, and like if they had any growing questions, because a lot of the particular cultivars that we would sell clones of, either we grew them and cloned them, or one of our good growers or friends that we worked with did. And so we could always give them knowledge or insight on, how each cultivar can respond in different environments. But yeah, it was a crazy time, Paul. It was like the Wild West and the like Industrial Revolution, like merging into one movement. And, it was definitely a time that was exciting. And it was a time that we knew we were on the cusp of like something huge and something bigger than just one medical marijuana shop in Modesto. And that was the exciting part of it too.
So what happened then? Where you were spreading these clones, and you were in Modesto. Did you open in new areas?
So our second move was going to be down into SoCal. We met with property owners down in Southern California. This is before any dispensaries had went down there. This Berkeley, LA patient group, now Berkeley patient group, hadn't went down there yet. So it was kind of a new thing down there to them too. They had no idea what was going on with it. But unfortunately, going back and forth on litigation with the city, and they saw the writing on the wall that they weren't going to be successful on the other end of this litigation. In September, so we opened in October of 2004. In September of 2006. Say again?
Where did you open?
Oh, we opened in Modesto in October of 2004.
Okay.
And
then the city.
Say again?
And then the city started to try to.
Yeah, the city started doing their bans and moratoriums and try to get us out of the city limits. And then once they realized we had really good attorneys then. James Anthony was one of them, our land use attorney, but we had a really team of good attorneys. And our position was pretty easy to defend though, because we were clearly open before you guys had passed any laws and all that stuff. And we were clearly following the state law as it existed at that time. So yeah, it was like, the city started doing that. And once the city realized at the end that, one, that they created a monopoly for us, and then two, that they weren't going to be able to like just get us out of there, like by the way that they wanted to, they just called the feds. One of the mayors at the time had a law enforcement background, and they just called it in the federal government and said, hey, we need to get these guys out of here. So the feds came in on September 27th, arrested myself, Ricardo, like two of our managers, two of our security officers, raided all of our houses, took our parents out onto the lawn, gunpoint, handcuffs, like just totally military, over the top, like raid styles, and completely unnecessary. But that was the mentality back then. It was the mentality of like them thinking that if they hammered us hard enough, I think that this thing would go away. Mm-hmm. And a testament to the industry and the people who continue to do what everybody has done. It didn't go away. But yeah, so Ricardo and I were arrested. We go through trial. They offer us 10 years as a deal before we go into trial. And we're like, that sounded like a lifetime to me at the time. I'm like, 10 years for running a state licensed dispensary? Like, that makes no sense to me at all. So we turned it down, went to trial. But what we didn't understand in trial in a federal court is that we wouldn't be able to use any of our state defense. We couldn't use that. It was a medical marijuana dispensary. We couldn't use our tax documents. They could use our tax documents against us, but we couldn't use them. We couldn't say the word medical marijuana. I couldn't say California law. It was like, we had all these restrictions and what they call motions in limine, basically a Latin term for saying limiting you on what you can say and what you can present. And so we just had to sit there and basically get painted as drug kingpins, and we're like trying to crafty and get in words here and there, and the judge would object and strike it, and but at the end of the day, we were found guilty. I was sentenced to 22 years in prison. Ricardo was sentenced to 20, first offense. These aren't like, it wasn't like habitual crime sentencing. This first offense, mandatory minimum 20 years. And that's common in the feds. That's not.
Yeah, I actually went through a federal trial myself, and I was facing a mandatory minimum of 10 years here in Oregon. I went to trial, and I was blessed that they introduced my library. Right. And in my library, there was a book called Marijuana, Your Legal Rights, and a chapter about jury nullification. Wow. And they to throw that out. Right. But fortunately, I had a decent federal judge. And in the end, I was sentenced. They found I let the jury go after they deliberated for 3 days, when the judge said he just fined me guilty of simple possession of 2 grams of marijuana in my pocket. And I recently got a pardon from President Biden. Nice. For that possession charge. And the federal prosecutor who tried to put me in jail for 10 years has had me testify in his marijuana cases. And I have a picture of him in front of this mural behind me. He says he's now on Team Paul Stanford.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
But you weren't so lucky in terms of your federal trial.
No, we weren't so too lucky. I'm glad that happened with you though, because that you are actually the first person that I've talked to that pardon actually like had a real world effect on. Actually, I take that back. There's 2 people. There's one other person I know that they got caught smoking in a national park, and they got a citation for that, and they got that pardoned. But other than
I
that,
got two, actually. I got two pardons. One for that case, and before that, I'd been arrested in the United States Capitol with marijuana, and so I got a pardon for that as well
that's cool.
from Washington.
Wow, that's awesome. That's an honor. Yeah. So,
So, but were you immediately incarcerated upon conviction?
oh yeah,
Did they
yeah. So
you turn
you,
yourself in?
if you don't have, I don't remember the cutoff. I think it's 20 years. If your sentence is 20 or above, they just get you, they grab you right there. If it's 20 or below, like 10 or below or something, they'll let you turn yourself in, because I think the propensity of them thinking like if somebody has, X amount of time, the likelihood of them turning themselves in becomes less and less as the time goes higher.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So
So
they immediately incarcerated you, and
immediately.
that was in 2000 and what, 5?
No, so we're arrested in September of 06, and then we fight the case. We both get out on ankle monitor, which that was a mess too. Like we had to put up a bunch of property, and like they fought us tooth because they want to keep you in prison to fight. They know they got a leg up on you if you have to fight it from inside. So
Yeah, you can't do anything to help
you can't
yourself
do
in
it.
there.
It's everybody. You got to get help from everybody else, and if you don't have that network, you are screwed. So yeah, like we got out, we fought it for 2 years, and then we were found like the guilty verdict came down on May 15th, 2008. They grabbed us right there. And we were later sentenced. We were sentenced actually, my sentencing anniversary was 5 days ago on November 21st, 2008 is when they handed the sentence down to both of us and shipped us out to prison. And that was a challenging, I mean, it goes without saying that it's a challenging 15 years in prison, but it was extra challenging because of like why we were there, what we felt like. We really felt like political prisoners at the beginning of our sentence. And
You were.
yeah, we really did. And I felt like, as we sat in prison and we watched state after state legalize and we watched the industry grow and stuff, it was such a mixed emotion of feelings that were going on. It was, I love the plant. I've been around it my whole life. I know the benefits that it can have with people. I've seen the miracles that the plant can do. So like, I'm a cheerleader on the side saying, yeah, let's go, like state after state. But then at the same time, I'm like, but what about us? Like I'm sitting in here with not only myself, Ricardo, Parker Coleman, Corvain, Coop, all of these other guys are sitting around me with just cannabis charges. They don't have gun charges. They don't have like other drugs. It's just marijuana only charge. And we're all sitting in there watching these states and all these corporations and governments bank millions and billions of dollars on this plant, while we're incarcerated for the exact same conduct. And it was a frustrating feeling going through that. It was something that I had to get over, and then something that I had to like explain to my family and to my daughter. Imagine trying to explain the juxtaposition of state law, federal law, the cannabis laws, and all that to like a 6-year-old, right?
Was she 6 years old? Was she 6 years old when you first were incarcerated?
When I was taken away in trial, she was 5.
I see.
When I got out, Jasmine was 20 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I had 2 children at the time I went through that federal trial.
Right.
And the third one wouldn't have been born in here today if I hadn't been acquitted of
Right.
the cultivation.
Yeah, it's crazy
And
to look at it like that, right?
That I did the cultivation, but the jury, we were able to get it across the jury that I was facing a 10-year sentence.
Yeah, see that's
And I actually buddy on the jury who told me what happened in the jury room too. So
that's awesome.
got a little bit.
Yes, that is one of the things I didn't understand either. It was like they wouldn't let us tell the jury that, hey, if you convict us of running this dispensary, we have to do 20 years. The judge cannot say, oh, I don't, they're good guys, I don't think I want to get them. Like, I really wanted to communicate that to them, and they're like, no, the law says that the jury cannot consider penalty when they're doing the guilt phase. And like, I get it, like conceptually wise, I get why that is like that, right? But a jury of your peers in your community, right? Like the system that we set up was supposed to be a jury of the people of our community that we supposedly harmed, right? And then they decide, guilty or not, or even if or guilty, but we don't think you should be punished, and that goes into the nullification part. Oh yeah, we don't agree with the law, but like to have that situation in there is like, you would think that you could go in and have a jury of your peers be able to say, hey, like this is BS. But they can't say it's BS if they don't know the full story, right? You're only giving the jury half of what's going on. It's like, hey, do you think Paul smoked weed? Yeah, Paul probably smoked weed. But in my head, I'm thinking as a juror, even back in 2006, oh, well, it's some weed. Like our jury got interviewed afterwards and they said, we thought that they were going to get probation. We thought like the most this guy will do is a year, maybe. Two jurors like interacted. We had interactions like as we're going up an elevator and just little minor stuff. One of the jurors actually picks my daughter up and says, your dad's not going anywhere. Yeah.
Wow.
So like, the shock of when we got the guilty verdict and then the shock of like the 20-year sentence, the jury like they flipped out. Three of our jurors publicly came out into the media and said, we never would have voted guilty had we known that they would have done 20 years in prison. And that's the part where, I really do think in these cases, especially in the federal government and with these nonviolent drug offenses, the jury should know what the penalty is going to be. You have to know if you're sentencing some kid to 30 or 40 years for a nonviolent drug offense. You can't find that out afterwards.
No. It's the way we got it in is one of our the people who lived at this grow operation said that he was testifying so he wouldn't do 10 years in prison.
Ooh, yeah, nice.
So, then the jury realized the consequences there.
They're like, wait,
But
if this guy was going to get 10 and he's just over here testifying, well, we got, yeah.
So which federal prison did they put you in?
I started in Lompoc, did 7 years in Lompoc, went to Mendota. It was a new prison they just opened down by Fresno, in the middle of nowhere. Then I got moved to Victorville, which is a war zone down in the desert between LA and Vegas. And then they shipped me to Louisiana to a maximum security.
Wow.
Yeah.
Louisiana. When did that happen?
That happened in 2018.
So about after 10 years, they moved you to Louisiana. You can't have very many family visits coming out to Louisiana.
No, they do. And that's by design.
Why did they put you in maximum security? I mean, you were obviously not a danger.
Right.
You hadn't threatened anyone. And why did they put you in a maximum security facility?
It's all speculation, but it's mainly because I continued to be a strong advocate for the plant and not be remorseful for my crime.
Yeah.
So and then like the music video, I say "fuck the feds" in it. They didn't like it was there was a series of a bunch of different things that I think had an effect on it. But the feds too, like just generally speaking, they don't like you to settle into a prison too long. So and I think they have I forget how many prisons it is, 120 or something around the state, around the country. So once you're in a spot for 4 or 5 years, they usually like to shift you around. Well, that particular shift right there was right after a riot that I had no like involvement in other than just being there. And they just decided, hey, we're going to grab a handful of these guys and shoot them across the country. And they did. And they raised our security level points. And they put me in an environment that was like a war zone, like nonstop. Like, and worse than a war zone, because in a war zone, like the troops at least get to go back to a green zone at some time and like decompress and like not have to be on alert. It's not like that in the higher security prisons. There's no green zone I get to go back to. It's 24/7 high alert, uh, madness, violence, gangs, officer assaults, suicides, murders, all of those things. And it's the first time I really saw, like, in the other levels of security in prison, like things happen, fights happen, stabbings happen, and stuff like that. But this was the next level. Like, this was people being murdered for like $50 in front of everybody, and the person not caring. And yeah, it was a really, really high stress environment. And that's where I actually met Corvain. Corvain he was in Louisiana there too. He launched launched a brand with Anthony called 40 Tons. They're doing very well with it. But yeah, he had a life sentence. They gave Corvain life, and Trump got him out on a pardon. But yeah, it was a really crazy environment, Paul. And it's like, all the horror stories that you hear about prison happen there on a daily basis. And I was able to get my points back down by staying like just out of trouble, and that's hard to do. Like in those environments, like you're expected to do certain things. You're expected to, like, when something happens, to do certain things. And a testament to a lot of the good guys that were in there, they were like always real, I don't want to say protective of me, but they were like, Luke, you're just here for weed. Like, just chill out. Like, if there's something that has to go, we'll take care of it, and that type of things. It was really like a lot of, people that were trying to look out for me in that situation, because again, like it was a joke, like a standing joke, but I would say stuff like that. Like it would be like a huge, crazy war with whatever gang or whatever was going to happen. And I'd be like, guys, I'm just here for weed. Like, I don't, I don't want any problems. But yeah, so I finally get my points down. They ship me to a low security in Mississippi. And the whole culture of incarceration in the South is different. It's different than any other part of the country. They look at it differently. They treat the prisoner differently. The dynamic between the officer and the inmate is different. Like, it's a very different culture of incarceration. And Mississippi did not disappoint. It almost, like, it's like, have you seen the movie Life with Martin and Eddie Murphy?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, they're down on like some prison down in Mississippi or Alabama or something, and it's like an exaggeration of it, but there's a lot of things that happen in there that are common in the southern prisons and southern jails. So yeah, I was there. Ricardo, backing up in 2017, before I left Mendota, I wrote mine and Ricardo's clemency petitions with the help of Weldon Angelos, who runs Mission Green now, and my good friend Georgine Arsons, shout out Georgine, helped us write these petitions. I sent them in, and in 2017, I get denied clemency, but Ricardo's gets granted. And it was really kind of shocking, because I wrote both the petitions. They're the same petition. I just changed the name on the top of the petition. Really, our offense conduct was the same. We went to trial. We got the same. I got a little bit more time than him, 2 more years, but it was almost the exact same everything. So it was again a bittersweet thing. I was really happy that my brother was getting out and being able to get back to his family. But then I have to explain again to my daughter, like, why he gets to go home and I don't. And so that was a trying time too, but also one that was, had some joy in it. And then fast forward, after I go down to the low in Mississippi, this is now, we're post-COVID, it's 2022. I'm still filing anything I can to get out of prison. I've learned the law like back and forth now the hard way too. Before they had computers, I had to go into law books, and you'd be reading one case and it would say, go see this other case. And you have to go back into the law library and find the book that had that one case in it. And you might only use that for one sentence. And then you have to go back. Like it was a tedious way to learn the law, but I learned it the right way, and I learned it very well. So I was able to finally file a motion that had a lot of merit to it, and the judge granted me an attorney. The attorney was not very knowledgeable about the law that we were using, because it was a new law that just had gotten passed by the First Step Act that Trump signed in 2018. And inside of the First Step Act, they had a prison reform section that changed one of the statutes called compassionate release. Before, only the director of the Bureau of Prisons could recommend somebody for compassionate release. And I mean, as you could imagine, they did it very, very, very rarely. It's not in the computer system mind of the warden or the director or any of those people to think about like early releases and think about ways to get people out of prison. Like they're programmed to do the other way, right? To how do we keep people here? How do we get more people here? How do I secure this like revenue stream and job and all that stuff? So they never used it. So in 2018, when they passed the prison reform, the First Step Act, they changed it and they made it to where the prisoner now can directly petition the court, and if they have extraordinary and compelling circumstances, can have their sentence reduced. So I filed a motion. Of course, we had extraordinary and compelling circumstances, being a state legal dispensary. We've served 15 years at that point already, or 14 and a half years at that point already. And then I couldn't get any kind of like response from the court. It was almost like they just banked my motion and wouldn't listen to it after getting the attorney, and the attorney's trying to file and they're not getting any response. So finally I get a huge blessing. University of Minnesota was doing like an academic project called the Trial Penalty Project, and it was basically a system where if you were offered a deal but you went to trial and got longer than what the deal would have been sentence-wise, that you paid a trial penalty for exercising your right to a trial. So, it's not a law. It was strictly an academic exercise. It's a theory of law that's starting to take hold now, but it's not, you can't go into court and say, hey, trial penalty, and they let you out or something. That's not how it works.
Yeah. When I went through my federal trial, I was offered 5 years. Right. And because I didn't take it, they said they were going to incarcerate me for 10 years.
Right. That's the way they work. They say, oh, you want to exercise your right? You want to make us spend our energy and money? We're going to hammer you now. We're really going to hammer you now. So, yeah, we end up, I end up getting farmed out to a firm called King and Spalding. I had no idea who they were, but as I get the first letter from them, I see that their address is 1700 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. So I'm like, well, I know who's at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So yeah, it can't be bad to have your lawyer living next door to the president, or, live in, I say, but like their offices. And so I do research on them, and they're actually all over the world, and they had been around since like 1880. It's a very prestigious firm. And the attorney that ends up taking my case there is a woman named Carrie Dent. Wonderful lady, very sweet. Like if you looked at her, she just, just looks like a wonderful, sweet lady. But in the courtroom, she is like a gladiator. And she demolished. She like, not only did she get the court, she used some of her resources, because they have like a bunch of people in their firm, like anybody from the government that retires from the government, top of the level, goes over there. Like Sally Yates works for them. Rod Rosenstein works for them. Like all their top attorney generals and all, like they go work for King and Spalding after they go out of public service. So it's a very, very good firm, very prestigious, and has a lot of connections. So they was able to reach out to the judge in California and say, hey, my client has had something filed with you for years now. We want a response on it. They get a response back. Then the judge hits her with I have these legal questions, 3 of them. And he of course articulates it a lot better than I can, but he basically says whoever answers these questions the best wins, and you got 48 hours to answer them, and it has to be answered in 3 pages. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of a judge doing that before, and I've never been a part of it. But it was crazy, and so now I'm like, oh man, like my whole life is coming down to this 3-page answers to these legal questions that I really hope my attorney can write good. Like I really hope she answers these well, because I had a lot of attorneys that didn't, and there were so many times that like we got to the finish line and then like they would just drop the ball like on something. I'll just be like, oh no, don't say that, or don't say that, and they like, or you have to say this, and they wouldn't. So like to have everything resting on this one document was a lot of pressure, and she massacred the government. It was the most well-written response to a legal question and like a rebuttal of the government that I've ever read. And I know like I'm biased on it, of course, but man, she did a really good job. Not only is she a phenomenal writer, a compelling writer, but she hit the questions like right at the heart of them. And as I read both of them side by side, her response and the government's response, I knew we'd be. And
How long did it take the judge to respond?
Months. Nothing happened. That was the other thing. It's like, okay, yeah, we're gonna beat them. We're gonna beat them. Yeah, we got it. And nothing. 1 month goes by. 2 months goes by. And now I'm like, did we win? Did we beat them? Maybe we didn't. Like maybe I'm looking at this like, you know, when you watch a boxing match and it's like you're rooting for the one guy, you don't really see all the hits that hit him. You're rooting for your guy, right? So I was thinking maybe I just didn't read. Like maybe I'm so biased that I just think this is that I won, and we really didn't. And on a Friday morning, I'm getting up. Like every day, I'm thinking maybe this is the day. Even after months, I'm thinking maybe we'll hear back today. But like I always thought, like as it got to the end of the week, judges aren't going to make no rulings on Thursdays or Fridays, because then they have to. If it was a positive ruling, they'd have to make the prison scramble, before the end of the week. So on a Friday, I'm getting up, I'm doing my normal routine, making some coffee, getting ready to work out, and I see a message that's on there's like an email system, like a closed email system, monitored email system that they let you get emails back and forth on of approved contacts. And I see one of first I have a bunch of emails, which is kind of rare. Like usually you have like 2 or 3. I had like 20 something, which was really rare. And then the first one I saw was from Carrie Dent, and the subject line said, "You're a free man." Like that was it. There was no lead up to it. I'm get onto the computer. It says, "You're a free man." I open it up. She tells me the judge made the ruling that you'll be out of prison by 4:00 that day. Over.
All right.
Just like that. They got me out of that prison, put me on a plane. I was in California, in Sacramento that night.
That's a fascinating story, and I'm glad you put it into this book, High Price. I recommend you go out and get this book. And what are you doing now outside of that? You got a podcast? I see that logo behind you. We don't have much time left.
Right.
But tell us about what you're doing today.
Yeah, so we have the podcast that we're really excited for. We're really excited about. It's our first season. It just aired earlier this month on the 7th. Our first episode with Money Make It Magic from Cartel Crew, the VH1 reality show. Had an awesome show with him. You can find us on YouTube and subscribe. Check us out. We'll have 2 a month coming out. Our lineup of guests is really cool, because I didn't want to just box myself into just people with cannabis or just talk about cannabis, because cannabis is used in such a broad way now, and we use it with athletes and with in different work environments and this stuff. So one of our next guests is going to be a gentleman named Max Payne from the UFC, who uses cannabis for recovery and stuff like that, which is a sports angle that I really like, because I played sports growing up and I used it for recovery a lot. And I think it's something that, as more and more athletes, get on board with it, I think it'll be a lot beneficial. So the show is really exciting. We have behind me, you see the symbol, the P symbol, that's for profit. That's our legacy California cannabis brand that Ricardo and I launched when I got out last year. The plant has always been our first love. So as soon as we got out, we reconnected, linked up with Mandy Tingler, who's like a phenomenal brand scaler and launcher and whisperer in this game. And it was a fortuitous meeting, because we were trying to figure out what the new market was like and how to kind of navigate it. And she was somebody that had already been in the market for 10 years, helping brands and launching brands and scaling them. So we launched Profit earlier this year in January, and it's been great success, huge support from the community. I think we're already going to hit our first million in our first year of sales. So that's
Congratulations.
really exciting.
That's great.
And 10%. Go ahead. No, I would say 10% of our brand, until it doesn't have to happen anymore, it goes back to the men and women who are still incarcerated. 10% of our profits, because it's really important for us to make sure that we are the voice that continues to keep this activism and movement, and make sure that the people aren't forgotten that paved the way for the industry to be able to continue to go.
How did your daughter survive that time?
Man, she's a testament to her and her resilience and the amazing young lady she is. She is actually our lead brand ambassador now at Profit, which is it's so cool to be able to do this. She was always with me as I was growing, as when I was younger. She used to help me clone.
She visit you much in prison?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Until I got moved across the country, she was there. At least her mother was very good about making sure that we maintained our contact. And so I used to see her sometimes twice a month, at least once a month. They would drive up there. The drive from Modesto to Lompoc it's 5 hours, so it's not really an easy one. And then when I got shipped out of state, it just became so much of a financial hardship that the last 5 years I saw her one time.
So is there anything you'd like to say in closing here, Luke? This has been a great interview, and I appreciate the time. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Just I want to continue to put pressure on whoever is in the Oval Office that we have men and women who are still incarcerated for cannabis. I know that we have a lot of situations that have to get figured out, safe banking and interstate commerce and all these other intricacies of it. But the one thing that we all can agree on is we need to make sure that all of the men and women who are incarcerated for cannabis are freed. That is,
Amen.
We all agree on.
Thank you again, Luke Scarmazzo. Pick up this book, High Price, for more details. I appreciate your time, and keep working to restore hemp.